Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. We're just going to give it a minute or two to give people a chance to join, and then we'll get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. I think we can get started. So thank you for joining the Creating Effective Content Using Your Phone webinar today. It will be hosted by our friends at the Saltways, who are a filmmaking agency, and they specialize in charity films. So today, on the call today, we have Sarah and Peter from Saltway who will be delivering the webinar content. We also have my colleague Beth, who's our marketing manager as well, on the call today. Before we get started, I'll just give some housekeeping. So on the right-hand side of your Zoom panel, you'll have a chat function. Please use this to introduce yourselves, network, share ideas. And if you have any technical issues, please put them in the chat function and we can pick them up there. At the bottom of your Zoom panel, you have the Q&A box where you can put in your questions, which we'll pick up for the Q&A portion of the webinar. I would strongly urge you to try and focus your questions more on the actual content of this webinar. If you have any questions more related to the process or operational side of the Christmas challenge, either email us after the webinar, or we do have the Ask Us Anything webinar next Friday, where you can ask us all of those types of questions. So we really want to use the best time with Sarah and Peter today to focus on the content that they're delivering. If you need any transcription service, if you click on the More button at the bottom of your Zoom panel, you should be able to turn that on. And finally, just a reminder, we are recording this webinar and we will be posting it on our YouTube channel. But without further ado, I will hand over to Sarah and Peter.
Thank you. Hi, everybody, and welcome today, and thank you so much for joining us. As was mentioned, we're from the Saltways. My name's Sarah, and like the rest of the team at the Saltways, my background is working in the charity sector. So primarily, I started my career in fundraising, and I now work with the Saltways and support their charity clients throughout the filmmaking process, generally in the back end, although sometimes I will be there on set as well. But I'm quite often there to support the onboarding and make sure clients go through that process. And we really believe strongly in collaborative working. So we encourage that with all of our charity clients. The Saltways was set up by co-founder Peter and his sister Emma, and he'll tell you a little bit more about that now.
Hi, I'm Pete, creative director at the Saltways. We initially started this production company because I have a background in documentary making, and that's what I've been doing for years, with an emphasis on like storytelling, like personal storytelling. And Emma, my sister, was working for a charity in York and doing a Christmas campaign, and she was having a kind of some struggles with dealing with the production companies that didn't seem to really understand the sector, especially for small charities. And I went to visit her after finishing a job. And it just so happened that I had all my equipment with me because I was literally coming back from a job. And she said, I've got this campaign. What do you think about actually doing something together and using my expertise in documentary making and her expertise in what the needs of the charities and what the message they wanted to get across, etc. So we made that campaign together, and then after that, it was very successful, and we won a couple of awards. And we thought, oh, this is perhaps something we could do. It feels like it was something that was missing in the sector a little bit anyway. So yeah, we started the Saltways. It was about 5 years ago now. We're very busy and happy, and keep our emphasis on storytelling and that at the heart of everything. I think storytelling and character-based storytelling.
Thanks, Pete. And that story of Emma setting up the Saltways is something that remains at the forefront of our mind when we work. So one thing that we truly believe in is making filmmaking accessible to all charities and storytelling through film, importantly for us. So one thing we prioritise within that is ethical fundraising. If you could just skip along the slides, Peter. So there, we're just to reiterate that about all charities should be able to create films that have an impact without the heavy production or effects. So hopefully that's what you'll take away from today. That'll give you the empowerment and knowledge to be able to create films with just the phone in your hand. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about ethical storytelling. If you can move along. So we prioritise this throughout the whole process of our filmmaking storytelling approach. And for this purpose, we've just given you some really clear points that you can keep coming back to throughout your process of capturing content. And they are consent. So making sure that the people you film are aware that you're filming them and what the purpose of that is for. And then that goes hand in hand with the next point, which is transparency. So being really clear what the purpose of your film is for and what the messaging that you're trying to get across is all about. And co-production. So this is something that we really build into our project, and it's making sure that everybody who is involved in the storytelling process has a voice throughout the whole project. And that will be from the very beginning when the brief is created right through to when the film is complete and it's going to be shared. And we'll just show you a little film about the Saltways now.
There is a tendency in some documentary filmmaking and in the charity sector for you to be viewing someone through a lens, which you are practically, but you want the feeling when you're telling ethical storytelling that you're with someone and they're telling you their story, and it's done with respect.
Give people space and time, because those are the two most important things. And I think just treating the story with respect is really important to me.
You want people to care, then you just let someone see the human behind the story.
So introduction's done. We're going to move on into the main part of this workshop, and we've broken it down into 3 key sections, and these are the 3 sections that would be followed in any filmmaking process. So we're going to take you through pre-production, production and post-production. So starting at the beginning, we'll go straight into pre-production. And this is all about planning for what you're going to film. And the more planning you do and the more refined that is before you pick up your phone to start filming, the more effective your content's going to be, because you're going to have a goal and you're going to have a clear mind on what kind of footage that you want to capture. So there's some questions to ask when you go through that. Is why are we making the content? What are you wanting people to do when they view your film? Are you wanting them to make a donation? Are you wanting them to sign a petition? Are you just wanting them to know that you're there and understand more about the work that you do so that they can better support you or pass on your message to other people? Who are you talking to? Is this people who know you already? Is it people who've potentially used your services? Is it people who've supported you for a really long time? Because all of those different things, and there's lots of different elements in terms of who those people are, and it might be a wide range of people, but the more you understand about the people you're talking to, again, the clearer you can make that message, and you can tailor the story and the messaging to that audience. How do we want them to feel? And again, that probably ties into why you're making the content. So how do you want them to feel after viewing? Do you want them to feel really passionate about your cause and wanting to take action? Or do you want them to feel really knowledgeable so that they can go on and spread your message? Next to ask is, what is the message? What is that key point or points that you want people to take away from viewing the film, and then thinking about how we can deliver the message. And there's lots of ways that you can tell stories through films, and we'll come more onto that throughout the production phase.
Okay, so we're going to go into production. So I'm going to take over with this, and we're going to go through just some practical bits of advice on how to film things with your phone, mainly now in this section. So the first thing I want you to do is I just want us to set up our phone in what I would say is the best settings for this, for any kind of content. So we're going to change, if you can, open your camera and go onto video. And then I just want to change the frame rate and the resolution. And we're doing it into what is the most compatible across kind of all platforms. So on your phone and maybe onto a bit of editing software if that's what you're using as well. Frame rate is just how many pictures a second it takes to create the illusion of movement. And resolution is just how big it is. And my advice would be to shoot at 4K if you can on your phone. Most phones can, or HD. I wouldn't go above 6K or I wouldn't go up above 4K to 6K. So some phones have that, but I just think it's a bit overkill. And I don't see a lot of difference in quality either. I just think they're bigger files most of the time. And then 30 frames a second is kind of like a nice average. Like cinema cameras shoot at 25 frames a second, but not really needed. And then you will have probably an option to shoot at 60 as well. But that is not necessarily better. So that kind of, it's a little bit overkill for film work. Like 60 frames a second is what you'd use for like gaming and stuff like that. And you can have some compatibility issues, or I have, especially if you're mixing different footage from different phones or whatever, which you might be doing, say if people have contributed film to a campaign. So just to change them, I've gone through the why, but now how to change them. So if you look on the left-hand side image, the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see it says 4K and 30. That's the frame rate and resolution. And if you can just tap on those and it'll kind of like scroll through the different options you have. So I would set it to 4K and 30 frames. And then it's pretty similar on an Android, which is on the right-hand side. Your phone might look different as well. You might have a different model, or it could be a different operating system. And the best thing to do if you want to do this is just Google or go on YouTube and look up changing frame rate and resolution, and then make and model of your phone. Okay, another good tip is grid lines, and this helps with composition. So it helps with making a frame just look nicer. So it's like a little guide for you to like frame someone well or something well. I use these on my professional cameras as well. I think they're just really useful. So on the left-hand side on an iPhone, you can just go into settings, then camera, and you can put on grid. You see it's like at the bottom in the second image. You just turn that on, and then you'll get these grid images. So it'll be two that it'll split the if you're shooting it in landscape, it'll split it into thirds. And then you can also turn on an iPhone, it says formats. Some of you will have this option, and put it on most compatible, not high efficiency. And that again will help if you're putting it onto maybe some editing software. You might get some issues if you don't do that. And the same on an Android on the right-hand side, but it's just within the camera, and then you'll see it's like a cog setting as well. But again, best to just Google it, and if you can't do this, or if you can't see those options on your phone. Okay, focus, exposure, and zoom. This is all really simple. Focus is just what is sharp in the image, what is in focus. Exposure is just how light and dark it is. And zoom is just zooming in, which you can do by, pinching your phone or pulling out. And most of the time I tend to, when I'm shooting things on phone, I mean, I use zoom a lot when I'm shooting on professional cameras, but if I'm shooting something on a phone, I think it's just nice to keep it simple. And your phone only zooms in digitally as well. So all you're doing is blowing up the image anyway. So the best thing to do is just leave it. And if you want to do some blowing up part of the image, it's best to do it in post-production, because then you have more options. Whereas on a on a normal camera, it's a physical thing happening, so you don't get any degradation in quality. You would do if you do it when you're pinching on a phone. But here's a really good tip, which I use a lot. You'll notice that like as your phones have gotten better and better, that the kind of like auto things that it does for exposure, focus, and whatever, now are pretty good. Like it tends to find faces, but it's not always completely reliable. Sometimes it does something you don't want it to do, like say set the exposure for outdoors or whatever, and you're shooting someone by a window. Let's say this example, it might be trying to expose the outside rather than the dog, or or in this image as well, it could expose the Buddha. You want the dog exposed properly. So if you tap and hold onto your screen on the bit that you want, so in this case on the dog's face, you'll see that it'll come up and say AEAF lock, and that just means it's going to lock the focus and exposure and not try and do any automatic stuff until you've finished recording that clip. So then you can press record, and then once you've finished recording, it'll turn itself off. And on the second side, you can see that we've done it there to the Buddha instead. And you can, if you look at the difference in sort of quality of the Buddha, you can see that it's a little bit sharper, the contrast is a bit nicer, and you can see as well the dog is now sort of slightly out of focus as well. So what can we film? I think it's always good when you're starting to do production or you're starting to film something, is that you've done all your work in pre-production. So you sort of know the messaging, you know where the film is going, you kind of like key bullet points of what it's about and what you want people to feel or whatever. And that should always inform what kind of content you're gonna shoot anyway. And it could be really simple, like this stuff doesn't have to be that complicated. It could just be a selfie video of you talking about something. That's still, a bit of content you could put up on your socials. But let's go through some of the things that you can do. So pieces to camera, they're really good, really engaging, really easy to do. And you can kind of do a lot with it. It could be like a longer form interview about a lot of things, or it could just be something really simple, a little call to action or a thank you message or whatever. Behind the scenes stuff. So it's always really good to show and not tell as well. And it's also good, say if you're talking about all the work you've done, so you've had some fundraiser event and someone's talking about the fundraiser event, it's just nice to have that footage as well. And you've always got your phone on you most of the time, most people do. So if you are at something where things are going on, you can just shoot a bit of that stuff and then later on use it in a video. So it could be 6 months down the line or whatever, but it's just nice to keep a sort of bank of things that you could use in your videos as well when things are going on. Think visual. How can visual support your story? So I think, say if you've got an interview or whatever, just try and think, how can we explore that visually as well? So similar to what I was saying then, you do a thing called shooting what we call B-roll, and say if we've got someone telling their story or something, we'd have some B-roll of maybe their house, or if maybe them going through some photos if they're talking about something that's significant that's happened in their life or something like that. And it's all really good to just add a bit more depth to the film or the piece and make it a bit more engaging as well. So let's go through some lighting tips, because this is really important. You can see on the right hand side we've got two images. One is horrendously he's very underexposed, and the light is, even outside, isn't properly exposed. The properly exposed bit here is probably the blinds, which is not what we want. So here's my advice. I would tend to use most of the time just soft, even and flattering light, and that usually tends to be natural light. Natural light is just it's softer, it's more even, and that would just mean sunlight basically. But I would always try, especially if you're shooting inside, to get the ambient light, not the direct light of the sun. So not the sun shining on people. You want the reflective light in the room. So if you look on the second image, the one at the bottom, that person, we've moved away from the window, whereas this person stood right in front of it on the top image. And you can see that there's just a bit of reflective light on the one side. That's what is coming from the window, this natural light. And then you can see as well from behind, we've got the ambient light coming in from the back, which is sort of which has given her a little bit of a silhouette. It's separating her from the background a little bit as well. But I think the best thing to do is that you do have just real-time feedback in your phone. You can just look through into your phone and see how it's going to turn out anyway. So then you can just experiment. If you don't have great soft even light in the room, then maybe you could use some lamps, or you just find a place where the light, like from lights, it is more flattering. So if you've got like horrible office light, you don't want to be stood right underneath it, say like a strip light, something like that, or like a little spotlight lights you get. You want to be about a meter in front of them usually, so they kind of like sort of just silhouette you and do that thing of just separating you from the background. But again, just look through the phone and kind of experiment a little bit. Yeah, things like opening and closing blinds if it's quite harsh as well. So if we'd have closed these blinds on the top guy then and just had a softer light, then he might have been exposed properly, even stood there. Avoid using phone flash, and ring lights are a great additional kit. So the phone flash, we mean more the phone light, you can turn on. That I think that light tends to be a bit ugly, kind of looks a bit horror movie. But ring lights are good, and they kind of like solve all your problems, that you can, turn it up and down, and it's a nice soft light and it's quite flattering, and they're relatively cheap as well, ring lights. Okay, framing and background. So you can see that on these two images, we do have the thirds. I've only put the vertical ones on just because I want to show you where they should sit on the screen. So first decision to make is, are you going to do portrait or landscape? If you're not sure, I would just always shoot in landscape, because then you get the option after of cropping, and then you can change it into a portrait shot. Or you can make two versions of it. So one's for YouTube, where you might want, say, portrait is probably, it works better on YouTube, and then maybe you then make a landscape version for like Reels or TikTok or whatever. But if you are shooting portrait, you tend to want people sort of right in the middle, so between the two columns, and you just want them centrally in frame, and that looks the most pleasing most of the time. If you shoot in landscape, you'll see the best place for someone to be is off to one of the thirds, so kind of like split down the middle of one of the thirds that you see of the grid lines. And then non-distracting or relevant background. So you either want something that's not too distracting, so not things, not shooting in front of like distracting colors, or so a lot of movement that's not necessary, or something relevant. So in this bottom image, you'll see that this is a film we made about a guy in Albania who was for his living picking up rubbish and then selling it, and that's how he made his living. So we shot him in front of his work, basically. So the pictures, you're telling a story within the frame as well, which is always nice if you can do it. And then film at eye level. So you always want to be filming about at eye level, so the lens of your camera is about where the person's eye is. I mean, and then you can be slightly higher as well, like can look quite nice. But then if you go too high, it kind of looks like the audience is looking down on someone. It starts to create a bit of messaging that you don't really want, I would say. And then you want them looking into the space in the frame. So if you see on these two images, they are looking into the space in the frame, so the space that is there that they're not in, basically. And that's just more pleasing to the eye. So if that means that if you are doing a little interview, say with someone, then you put your camera off to the side, and then they'll naturally talk to you because you're doing the interview. And that's what's happening in these two images. And then mobile tripods are a great investment. I think they're good, especially if you're doing a little interview piece, because you can just set up your framing and then concentrate on having a good interview. And it's then you don't. I mean, you can do it sometimes where you know, you start talking to someone and you're having a nice conversation, you don't realize your phone is kind of tilted up or down or whatever, and then you've kind of screwed up your framing. So it's just a way of taking away some of the worry of that. So here's an example of this, what I was talking about, this ambient light that comes in through the window here. And we're just using to reflect some light. You'll see this on professional shoots, like in photography and documentaries or film sometimes, where someone stood there with a big like reflector board, which is like sometimes like silver or gold or white, and they're just bouncing a bit of light, and you can see the difference in the two images. And we're just using here a pillowcase on a bit of cardboard. But you can see that, you know, everything reflects light, especially like walls and things like that. If you've got a white wall, you'll get some ambient light from that, which is good. Okay, sound. So sound is 50% of your video, which you always should think about, because some people tend to forget about it. It's very easy to do. A lot of professional people forget about sound. But so the big sort of first point I would say, stay out of the wind. Like, wind will absolutely kill sound. And even with modern noise reduction software, like, wind is still almost impossible to get rid of because it just kills all the frequencies. So my advice would be stay out of the wind and get close to the camera. So just basically close to the microphone that's on the camera. You'll get better sound then. Use the wireless headphones that have a built-in microphone. So most of us now would have, you know, like a Bluetooth pair of earphones or headset with a mic. And if you use that most of the time, you're going to get good sound, and you could be a bit further away. And it's going to be audible anyway. Do a sound check and then watch it back before shooting the rest. So I would just record a little bit, go to a quieter place, have a listen, and then okay, yeah, it's fine. But then just, yeah, if you buy a road or there's some construction, you might have to move. Like, just go to a place where you can hear it's better. You can get now these little wireless, they look like little boxes that quite a lot of like TikTok people use. They're relatively cheap. We've got one that we can recommend as well that's relatively cheap. So if you are going to be doing more content, it's another way of just not having to worry about it. They just kind of do it all automatically. You just stick it on your t-shirt or whatever, and then you don't have to worry about the sound. Some of them come up with a little wind like shoe thing on it as well, so you can be in a more windy environment. So yeah, you can invest in some equipment. We do, if you want us, we've got a recommendation of a couple of things, like a sound kit. One is like a little microphone that clips onto your phone, and then another thing is like another lav mic pack, and just a ring light and stuff like that. So if you want us to, if you want any advice on that, we can send you that. Okay, interview techniques to capture an impactful story. So you've got all your phones set up, you kind of know what you're doing in that aspect. And now it's time to make something engaging. And this is just really, really important to make this feel as natural as possible, give someone the space. We like we were saying at the start, we always want to give the person the space to tell their story, because most of the time that's the most engaging thing, is just and that can be the story about them or the charity or whatever. It's all storytelling. So prepare your questions, and that just means go through your questions, like keep them quite succinct, I would say, most of the time. Just stay with the important things. Be natural. So try and make it feel more and more like a conversation with the person. Or if you're doing it yourself, let's say you're doing like a selfie thing, really try and stay clear of pre-prepared lines. Like, bullet points are fine, things you want to cover, but people can feel when they're watching something immediately whether it's kind of scripted and a bit, not natural, or if you're just talking from the heart, and I think you want that comes across more if you just kind of like get it off your chest. Include context. So what I mean by that is that it's really important when you're asking someone a question, is that they include the question in their answer to give context, so you can just use that on its own. Otherwise, it just makes it more complicated. So the example I give is if you say to someone, "What did you have for breakfast?" and they say sausages, that's all you have is someone saying sausages. Whereas if they include the question in it, if they said for breakfast I have sausages, then you can just use that. That can be used as a clip. So any answer can just be used as a clip. Makes editing so much quicker and so much easier and so much more useful. And then open questions. So you don't want to ask questions that would just be answered with a yes or a no. You want to ask questions that allow someone to just open up and talk, and give them space as well. Like, don't kind of butt in and be going like, oh yeah, like, and don't when they've kind of finished answering the question, a good bit of advice I once got is just to leave a silence, because sometimes people will then build on their own answer anyway to fill the silence, and sometimes you get some of the best stuff because people are then thinking about it more. They get a bit more comfortable as well the more they talk usually. And then listen, and then follow up and follow up and follow up. So that's kind of like, if you prepared your questions well, your questions, sometimes you won't even have to look at them anyway. You kind of know what you're talking about, and then you can just be engaged in the conversation, and just listen and follow up with things like, how did that make you feel? What was the impact of that? Like things that really, open up, or what, it depends obviously on what kind of content you're making, but the principles of it are always the same. Like if you're asking, say you're talking about the work that your charity does, ask them why it's important. Ask them what motivates them to do that. Like that will be much more engaging than just, the nuts and bolts of what happens day to day. Okay, so we're just going to show now a video of, so this is a good example of the content is always king with this sort of stuff. So you can frame something amazingly, you can have amazing light, it can all be straight, whatever. But if the content isn't good, then it doesn't really matter anyway. And content matters more than all those things anyway. So this is an example of a film that we made for Jeans for Jeans, and it was and we did this as a sort of co-production. So it was done that Ellie here, under our guidance, filmed a load of things that are happening, and then we edited it after as a co-creation piece. And it's a good example of sometimes, you don't need the best framing, you don't need the best sound. If it's engaging, it's engaging.
My parents just left to go to the local doctors because they have to learn how to inject Hayden if he ever misses his steroids in the morning. It's quite stressful being home alone because I've got to make sure Hayden's all right, and I have to look after the dog, which didn't sound like much, but I'm at home alone with a severely disabled brother. It's not even a long amount of time. They'll be out for about 20 minutes. The doctor's not very far away. The filling of the tablet, it's a tablet dispenser.
Deflazacort steroids keep his muscles going.
They're very important.
They are
Agreed.
very important.
Too hot,
Is that too hot? Sorry.
And then the other one.
Yep. Straighten your leg then.
Nice.
What are you doing? Are you okay? So yeah, as well as having Duchenne and a genetic disorder, I don't know if it's part of the drugs or stuff, or whether it's just the way he is, but he's also partly on the autistic spectrum. So these outbursts will happen, once a day, a couple of times a day, sometimes. It's just never knowing what to do when he kicks off. I just sort of sit there and hope it's gonna stop, and it sometimes doesn't. Two times 24.
48.
Yay. Wait a minute. Have I worked out volume or surface area? Please Google how to do it.
Smile.
Nice face you got there.
And I know when I need it, I can count on you. Like 4, 3, 2, you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do. Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I think that was just also a good example of that sometimes the work that you do cannot seem that interesting. Like when we were talking about that video and first asking them to what we could film, when we said about just doing their day-to-day stuff as them as a family, they were kind of a bit like, well, that's not very interesting because it is their day-to-day. But then, you know, if you show it in a certain way, and with Ellie, she was so great in that as well, then it really it can really live and it can be engaging content. So post-production. So this is just what you do when you've got all of your footage shot. And we're just going to go through, we can't go through a lot of editing stuff because it's very technical, but we can give you some tips on what you should be doing. So here are some editing tools that are free and you can use on your phone. iMovie or Clipchamp are both really simple to use. When I first started editing, I started editing on iMovie years and years ago. CapCut, which is a lot of people use that now, and it's really intuitive. Adobe Rush is one that is like a scaled back version of a professional piece of software that we use. So maybe if you are thinking that you're going to get more and more into filming, you might want to go onto Adobe Premiere Pro, then that is a good one as a kind of like stepping stone to doing to becoming a bit more serious about it. And then TikTok and Instagram Reels, that's just using the editing things that are based in there. They're really quick to use. They have, you know, copyright-free music you can have in there. It's got auto-generated captions. And they're pretty comprehensive. Like I would say you can create really good content on those if you just put a bit of time into it. So this is how I would approach an edit. So you're always going to have your messaging in mind. So watch all pieces to camera or whatever it is you're shooting and keep the messaging in mind. So those things that you worked out at the start in pre-production, you are always going back to those as kind of like, is this relevant to that messaging or those key points? So watch it again and then always be looking out for a hook. And what we mean by a hook is something that's going to stop someone scrolling. So usually it can be something that's quite an outlandish statement. So it could be something like, it was the worst day of my life, or it was the best day of my life. And it's just to get someone to go like, oh, okay, well, what was that? A bit of sort of intrigue to it. Or it can be, you know, we raised more money than we'd ever have dreamt. So it could be something like that, you know, but it's just, and then you can then explain the story after with the video, but it's just to get people to stop scrolling. And then when you're doing your edit as well, whatever it is, you can experiment with order and only keep the best bits, consider the viewer's journey. I would say you can be pretty non-linear with editing as long as the information's there. And just experiment, just move things around. It's quite a fun thing to do as well. And you'll find that, you know, you want to keep the story in there, but then the order can kind of change. Yeah. What other footage do you have? Sometimes it's good to cut away while the speaker is talking. I would say most of the time it's good to cut away with the speakers talking, because you can, unless it's something that's really personal and you really want to just see what they're saying, a lot of the time it's just nice. It makes it more engaging to cut to that B-roll that we were talking about. The things that you've shot, maybe it doesn't have to be completely relevant all the time. It could be some footage of, say, like a fundraiser you did once, or whatever, or something from, it could be photos or something from someone's story. But yeah, always it keeps it engaging, and it makes it easier to cut things down as well, which is another trick. And then add music, graphics, and subtitles. So you want it to be as accessible as possible. So you definitely want subtitles on all this content, I would say. Graphics, yeah, make it engaging. There also, if you didn't get some content, you can put up a slide with some information on. It's a really good way of like filling in some gaps. And then music just sets the tone immediately, so it's very important. The Andy test. So this is something we do with all our videos at the Saltways, this is my brother-in-law, Emma's husband, my sister. She always shows the videos to Andy because he's not really interested in them. And so you get a good reaction. And I also do it with my partner as well. I just get them to watch something and then sort of gauge. I ask them a few questions after, like, what was this about? And just see if it's kind of like either creating the right feel or you're getting the right information. It's just always a good test. show you videos to people and get their opinion. And it might be, you know, you have to, if something's not coming across, then you might have to go back and then, oh, did someone say that in a bit more depth? Or maybe I need to put that line back in that I cut out because I didn't think it was relevant or whatever. Accessibility. So this is just what I was sort of saying earlier. It's just really important. So your subtitles and captions, you can also do a color contrast test at this accessibility checker, and you can just put in your colors and see if they are going to be if there's enough contrast for people with visual impairment to be able to read on all your graphics that you do. Yeah. Okay, this is a final film that I think captures quite a nice feel. And this was actually, there's a slight story about this. We did another video for this this charity, but then this one came out of just this was kind of off the cuff. We just decided to do a tour, and we thought it captured the mood of the place so well that we made an extra video for them based on this. So yeah, I'll just show it.
So as we always say to everybody, the best way to experience the yard is to come on in. Loads of fun, every corner there's something happening. Hi buddy, you all right? So the art room, don't touch anything because you get covered in paint, we always do. Simple things, a bit of music, a few toys. You know, you'll find some children just gravitate towards a musical instrument and they'll sit there for hours. We try and join in, try and encourage that. Going to the outside, I think it's dry out there now. Bikes, skateboards. Hi buddy. Hello. And as you can see, even in the wettest, coldest winter months, the water's still a favourite. Hi! The yard is all about children and their needs and supporting them. But it goes further than that. We support the families.
So it's for children who have a disability, it's for their brothers, their sisters. It's really an open house, and what we try and do is create a home from home that allows people to come and relax and just have a little bit of fun.
And we just make sure everybody's involved, everybody's included.
That no matter how hard that day is, or how hard life can feel at that moment, you have support, and no family wants to feel alone when they're facing things that are difficult. So when you open the yard door, I think you're opening up a whole community of support.
When you first come in, it's just a great feeling. Oh, whoa, who was that? By the end of the day, you've been running around for 4 or 5 hours and you go away exhausted, but you know that every child, or that's our aim, every child has fun of some sort.
For families, you get support and you see your children happy and you feel that they're safe, you don't feel judged, you can genuinely relax. And for children, they can just play, and there's nothing better than that.
Thanks, Pete. So just to finish on that, this would take you to the end of your filmmaking process with that end edited effective film that you've got. But just to remember, once you've got that film, to really maximize the potential of it. So it's not just to share that film once. Remember, you've banked a lot of content throughout the capturing phase. So go back and look at what other footage you can use for other things. And then when you're sharing the film, remember that you can use it in lots of different ways to repurpose it. So cut stills from it, or take quotes from that to use in other messaging and things like that. So we hope you feel inspired after that, and we hope you feel like you've got some confidence to pick up those phones and start creating content with your phone from now. But if you've got any questions, it's over to you.
Thank you, Peter and Sarah. That was a really great webinar. A lot of great tips for everyone, and I know there's a lot of comments about how great the videos that you shared with us were. So really thank you again for delivering such a great webinar. We do have a couple of questions. So I'll kick off first. Is that I think Suze has asked, what's your opinion on vox pops She says she's mainly asking because directors at her old workplace always wanted them, but I question how useful engaging they are. Would be good to hear if you have any opinions on Vox Pops.
I think it just depends on the content you're creating. We've done one specifically. We did one for uh, a cancer charity, and it was kind of to show we were doing a thing where we were showing that people's kind of ignorance around some cancer diagnosis and stuff, or cancer screening techniques. And then it was useful. But most of the time, I think we tend to not use it just because we're looking for characters and we do a lot of research. Emma does a lot of when we approach a piece of work, we'll kind of like screen a lot of people and then see who's more engaging on camera as well. So I think that kind of takes away that part, which is part of our expertise, I think, knowing that. So I would say again, it's useful, but it depends on what you want from the video.
Beth, do you have any questions?
Yeah, we've seen a couple of questions coming in about recommendations for equipment, but also mics and ring lights. Are you able to share any of those?
Yeah, we can share we have like a little equipment list thing that we put together with some links to a couple of bits of equipment that we say are useful. So we can share those, and then maybe you could share them with the participants.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful. Someone has asked, is Microsoft Clipchamp video editor available for phone users? Do you know if it is?
I'd have to get back to you on that. I actually don't know. Maybe that was for maybe that's just on your laptop. I can't remember. I've not used that piece of software, but I can't remember. So I think it was Emma had used it for something. So again, it's easy to use. Maybe it wasn't on a phone, but it was on your laptop.
Oh, is it possible to just stop this screen share? I think we may have some
okay.
lip readers, so it just helps them a little. Thank you very much.
Okay.
What orientation would you suggest for video for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn when only creating one video is the option?
I would just go for landscape 16:9, because it's just the most universal. If you're going across those platforms, I would say, yeah, that would be my advice.
Saw a question here from Becky as well. Any suggestions on good places to find royalty-free music for your videos?
Yeah, so most editing software has it built in now, but also YouTube has a library of it as well, which you can just take from. I mean, you can also just go on YouTube and type in royalty-free music, and you can just like rip it from YouTube with usually with a bit of software. Like you could do or you could do it in a browser as well. Like just download, Google video download or whatever YouTube, and it's pretty simple to do, and then you can just put those under. But most bits of software now have the built-in royalty-free music in there. So they have a library of loads of music that you can use, as does like Instagram Reels and TikTok and stuff. You can use it royalty-free. So they're pretty universally available now. It's much easier to do than it used to be.
How do you communicate to the interviewee to repeat the question in their answer? This person's found young people they interview struggle to grasp what they mean and when they ask them to do this.
I give them that example that I said earlier, and then I'd say you try it because you're trying to create you're trying to do a balance, aren't you, of having something that feels like a conversation but something that's also really useful to and quick to use. So sometimes what we'll do, if someone's really struggling with it, we'll let them answer the question, and then at the end just say, could you just say the start again? So, and then we sometimes then use that at the start instead. And that's another way. If someone's really struggling with it, we just get them to repeat it at the end. So then you get a natural answer, then you also get that key bit of information as well.
I can't see any further questions. So Beth, I know you have a plug about our Christmas challenge video if you want to share that again.
Yeah, all of you should have received an email. I believe it's either the start of this week or last week, just about videos for our Christmas challenge video. As most of you might know, if you've taken part in a campaign before, we do a main kind of launch video to really raise awareness about the Christmas challenge and the amazing causes and charities taking part. So all of the information is in that email. So if you haven't seen it, it might be in your junk somewhere. But please do, if you have any content that you'd like to share, just promoting your impact or work at Christmas, it'll be really useful to kind of get those videos in. And you can send them to us via WeTransfer at media@biggive.org. But if for any reasons you have any issues, you just send us an email and we can help you out with that. But just as I was speaking, I saw Martin's actually said something in the chat. He's asked, if you're using stock footage or voice artists, how should you go about using them without coming across inauthentic?
Yeah, I think you just have to do your best job. I think if your messaging is there, I think if it is if it's well written and you're actually passionate about it and the writing comes from that place, that will come across anyway. And if you've got the right voiceover artist, like stock footage, I don't think it's that much of a problem. I just think it's always messaging. That's the thing, and it's just the quality of your. If it is like, say, it's a voiceover and just stock footage video, which are also good as well. If the writing's good and if that person did a good job with their voiceover, then I think then they can work. They can be engaging.
Great. I can't see any further questions, so I think we can wrap it up there. But I would just want to firstly remind everyone we do have two webinars next week. The Ask the Panel webinar on next Wednesday at 12 p.m. where we'll have previous charity that took part last year come and give a showcase on their campaigns from last year, and you can ask them your questions. And then the Ask Us Anything webinar next Friday, where it's just you can come and just ask any questions that you have about the Christmas challenge. All of your questions, please do ask them us at that webinar. But with that in mind, I just want to say thank you to Sarah and Peter for delivering a really great and helpful webinar for everyone. I know there's a lot of things that even us as a Big Give can take away for our own videos that we're creating. I want to thank all the participants for joining us today and with engaging with the webinar and asking fabulous questions. And I hope everyone has a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for having
everyone.
us. Bye, everyone.